So thank you so much for your time this afternoon. What we have today is a 2-hour session with the first hour being dedicated to beginning a career in sports law, and the second being a panel discussion on consolidating a sports law practice or an in-house legal team. For the first session, I think we have 4 fabulous panelists: Aahna, Mehrotra, Namrata, Chatterjee, Srinivasan, Saimani, and Rustam, Sethna. Each of them people with varied experiences in sports law and policy, and each with their own journey to share with us this afternoon. For the audience, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat room, and we'll try and take as many as we can. And we hope everyone enjoys the proceedings from this afternoon. So I'll start with just requesting all the panelists to introduce themselves and take us through their journey.
Hi, I'm Aahna Mehrotra, partner at TMT Law Practice. I'm just going to walk you through largely what I have done to pursue a career in sports law in terms of education is concerned. My interest in sports law, of course, begins from the fact that I used to play cricket back in the day. I got chosen to play cricket for India under 19, and I couldn't pursue it because the tournament that I was selected to play for was the South Asian Federation Cup back in 2006. However, the tournament was clashing with my board exams, and I chose not to go for it and finished my high school education instead. Thereafter, I went to law school. Of course, another thing that was important why I chose not to go for the tournament was also that at that point of time, women's cricket was not under BCCI. It came under BCCI only in 2008. So at that point of time, especially for women, cricket didn't seem like a worthy pursuit. So I went to law school instead. I went to ILS Law College, Pune. Something that sets ILS apart from some of the top law schools in the country, which is the national law schools, is that ILS doesn't really have a fixed regime. College hours extremely short. Mostly classes are from 7 in the morning to about 10 in the morning. At least back in the day, it used to be this way. So post 10 o'clock, you're free to choose your own, career path in terms of how you want to build your CV. Whether some people chose to intern through and through their 5 years and join, litigation offices. Others, of course, enrolled for, diploma courses on the side and did other stuff to build upon their CV. I, on the other hand, chose to do a whole bunch of summer schools while I was in law school, other than, the activities that I used to undertake during regular college hours. So I went to summer school at London School of Economics, which is a summer school in intellectual property. After that, I went to another summer school in entertainment law, which was back at Franklin Pierce. It's called now the University of New Hampshire. And thereafter, of course, my internships were more to, internships that I did in intellectual property. Of course, I did the regular one litigation internship, one NGO internship, etc. But largely they were, internships in the area of intellectual property and entertainment. I hadn't at that point in time. Nandan was pretty much the only established name, and I didn't get the opportunity to intern with him at that point in time. But so I, interned in ancillary fields, and thereafter I chose to work for a year before leaving for my master's at UCLA. So my first master's at UCLA was a mix of entertainment, sports, and IP. I chose not to pursue a master's in hardcore sports law because I was still uncertain about the future of sports law in India at that point of time. And I was pretty clear in my head that I wanted to come back to India and work. So I went to UCLA. I'd also made it to a couple of other law schools at the time that I eventually ended up going to UCLA. So in fact, I've done my admission in the Duke University, and it was a last minute change that I did to UCLA. The couple of reasons that I chose to pick UCLA over Duke was majorly the faculty. The entertainment and sports law program, especially the entertainment piece, was one of the best in the world, simply because you had people coming and teaching you from the industry. So you had lots of people who were working in Hollywood to come and teach you. And also another interesting aspect was that you could do up to 4 credits worth of internship. So instead of actually selecting a subject, if you volunteered to sit for a campus interview and you did get picked, then you could do up to 4 credits worth of practical training versus having to do classroom study. So I was fortunate that I got picked by Warner Brothers on campus, and I interned at Warner Brothers Intellectual Property and Anti-Piracy Department through my year at UCLA. So that sort of added to my even though I was clear that I wanted to come back to India, but that gave me some sort of work experience in the US, what it's like. And that really helped me hone my skills. Once, of course, I returned to India, it's pretty clear. By then, other than IPL, the Premier Badminton League was being set up, which was then the Indian Badminton League. So, I started working on that. One thing led to the other. It was, I think we were doing a matter for one of the I-League football clubs is when I happened to have met Roma at the Delhi High Court. And that's when I was discussing, she had been to the FIFA Masters, and that's when I was discussing the FIFA Masters with her, is when she told me about the ISDE program. Then I learned more about the ISDE program, and the good thing about ISDE was that one had the option to be able to do an executive master's versus a full-time course. So I could continue working and not having to again leave for about a year to finish another master's in sports law. But the reason I primarily chose to do a second master's in sports law is because the sports law that I learned about in America was very different from what is relevant in the rest of the world. The sports in itself, of course, that being an extremely popular market for baseball, basketball. In India, of course, we look at other sports, and so that's when it kind of made sense to do a second master's, which was hardcore sport. Also, the investment in doing the second master's wasn't too much since I got a scholarship. Thirdly, I looked at it more from a networking perspective because it was a program for professionals. So I looked at it more from a networking perspective in terms of it was being taught by professionals. Professionals were enrolled in the program. So going to ISDE sort of gave me, a network of about getting to know, close to 100 sports lawyers in 100 different jurisdictions, right? So that's why I picked ISDE, and work continued side by side. Then came back to India and started working, post ISDE, of course, joined TMT briefly and then set up my own practice. I had sort of moved on from TMT temporarily simply because TMT underwent a merger, and I've never believed in being a part of a sort of 80 to 100 people law firm. That's not my idea of running a practice. I've always wanted to be a part of a boutique law firm, running a small, I think the opportunities are more, the amount you're able to contribute is a lot more. So that's essentially why I sort of moved out temporarily, and I'm back with them simply because they're back at, to being a boutique law firm. And of course, my practice, other than sports law, is also involves a large gamut of other things. There are often a lot of taxation queries and things like that, which I personally don't have the expertise in. So having, the support of a full service firm helps in that scenario. So that's pretty much been my journey in brief. But later happy to take any questions that come along.
Thank you, Aahna. Srini, over to you. If you could just take us through what life has been so far for you once you graduated from Jodhpur. And
thanks, Roshan. So like you mentioned, I graduated from Jodhpur in 2012. And as Namrata would also say, back then we didn't really have any exposure to sports law or anything related to that in law school. And even during law school, I was more of a sports fan than a lawyer who was interested in sports. And it was only around graduation or, when I started working with Ketan after graduation was when we used to have conversations with friends, basically. We're all fans and we follow a bunch of sports. Why not do some work in sports as well? So, that was a conversation that went on for really long. By then, each of us were in our own corporate law jobs and all that. And it was around 2015 when I got the break to join Star. This was during the 2015 Cricket World Cup. And in over a year and a half at Star, I think I got to do some really interesting work, both acquisition of media rights, syndication, or on the operations side. And I think credit to how the team used to work there as well, because all the work used to be done in-house. So we got we got the exposure to a lot of work, and on all fronts. However small it is, to the largest acquisitions that the team does. And so this followed, and it's probably here where I go on to a different track than the others. So I was like, I've done a lot of stuff, but end of the day in sports, a lawyer is a support professional. You don't work in the core business areas. So I thought, and at that time there was Namrata and a colleague of mine, Harjas, had also done the FIFA Masters, and I had gotten through to the next edition that was starting in the year 2016. So my idea of doing the FIFA Masters was to get exposed to sports beyond the legal aspect of it, and even try working on the business side of sports. So that's why, I mean, the FIFA Masters, that was a brilliant experience. I mean, it exposed and provided a very different perspective on how to approach the industry or the issues in the industry as well. So, and that's also why when I came back, the first job that I did was the Baby Leagues project with AIFF. But I think at the end of the day, you still remain a lawyer, even though you go out and work on the business aspects of it. So by the end of 2019, 2019 April, we ended up, me, my wife, and a bunch of friends, we ended up starting Off the Bench, which is a sports media and entertainment practice, and now we are a little bit over a year old, and it's been a good learning ride so far, and we're looking forward to good times, hopefully.
And what is the inspiration for the name?
It's fairly simple, because we thought all change in sports comes off the bench, so let's try and bring some change.
Like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Srini. Namrata, I'll come to you next.
So, Shrini and I have some things in common in our journey in that way. For me also, in the sense, I've never really played sports, but I've always been a sports fan. So, I always believe that without the fans, you cannot have a sport succeeding. So, I really believe in the power of fans always also. Coming from that passion, initially, I didn't even, think of becoming a lawyer, forget sports lawyer. I was actually going for engineering, taking all the engineering coaching and all that. But then one fine day, I was like, no, I don't want to do engineering. And it's time to kind of go into law. My sister was already in law school. So probably that helped me decide that I want to go to law school. I also went to National Law University, Jodhpur. And while I was there, again, for me, it was my sister who actually told me in my third year that why don't you intern in a sports law firm or something while you're in law school to get that experience? You've always been interested in sports. This seems like a very niche area of sports and law like combined together. And she told me that a lot of, she was in NUJS. So she was like, a lot of her, college people had already interned at LawNK. And she suggested that I apply there. So I applied and I interned. Of course, that was 9 years ago, I think.
9 years ago.
Yeah. So yeah, that was like the first time for me to actually know what sports law was in practice, because before that I was just reading a bit about it or just hearing that, okay, it's an upcoming field or whatever. But while I interned with you guys, Roshan, you were the one I was actually working the most with. So it really helped to understand how things work. And the IPL was what we were kind of, working on, things like that at that time. So I found it quite interesting. And I was like, okay, I want to explore more of this. And even for my next internship, it was actually Roshan who connected me to Justice Mudgal. And he was like, why don't you try to intern with him next? I did that as well. So again, Vidush was also there. And, so just got more experience of, arbitration, sports arbitration and other side of things, not just intellectual property rights or, related things. So yeah, after that, I was quite interested and I continued reading up on it and, just like being interested. But then when the campus placements happened, I chose the safer route and went for the law firm. And I worked at Amarchand, Delhi for like 2 years. But while I was there, I was rotated between the corporate team, the litigation, dispute resolution team, even the IPR team, everything. So I got the experience of all. But out of those, I was more like keen on the dispute resolution side of things. So I enjoyed that more. But even that, law firms tend to burn you out somewhere, like these huge law firms and everything. So I was feeling that. And, even though litigation I was enjoying, but I was missing out sports law, doing, because we were getting some matters, maybe one sport related matter off the hook or something like that, but it wasn't a full-fledged sports law practice that I was involved in. So I felt that probably I've had enough work experience that now I should do a sports masters and then after that get into the sports industry a full-fledged way. At least give it a shot. So I simply Googled, because I mean, I didn't even have enough people that time who had, experience of sports law masters, etc. So I simply Googled, and one of the options that came out was FIFA Master. But FIFA Master just came out. I read about it. Seemed really interesting because, it was not just sports law. It had humanities of sports, sports management, and sports law. So I felt that, of course, I'm already a lawyer and that law degree always stays with me. This law firm work experience also stays. So trying to go and, do sort of a sports management or something outside purely the legal sphere might just increase my ambit. So thinking that I applied to SDA also, University of Zurich, even George Washington University for their IPR, LLM, everything. And I got through all of them, and, I got a scholarship also at some of the others. But for me, FIFA Master, again, was the more attractive option. And I got the full tuition waiver scholarship also for that. So these two things just made my decision very easy to kind of go for it. Because, financially, it was obviously going to be not easy for me otherwise without the scholarship. So with the scholarship, I was like, okay, it's more secure that even if I don't make it into sports law purely or, in the sports industry purely after that, it's not going to be, setting me back so much financially. So I went for that master's, and like, Srini was mentioning, had a very good experience in terms of the networking also. And in terms of, even your classmates, like, because there are people like, you have 30, 35 classmates from 30 different countries in a way. So it's like, you really gain a lot of perspectives, like, and most of them are already either working in the sports industry or have some experience already. So you learn not just from the professors and the people you network with, but even your classmates. And the alumni network of FIFA Masters was always very strong. That led me to my actually first, sports job in that sense. So because one of the alumni, James Kitching, he'd come to teach us while we were at the, doing the FIFA Masters. So he was already at the Asian Football Confederation at the time. He was the, head of their disciplinary and governance unit. So when there was a vacancy, he reached out to me and Harjas and, some of the other lawyers in our class. And he was like, there's this opening, so I would encourage you guys to apply. We did that, and somehow I ended up finally getting that job at AFC. So then from 2017, like almost for a 3-year period, I worked with Asian Football Confederation in Kuala Lumpur. I was actually there doing the disciplinary, regulatory, governance, like, that department is where I was working at. And I really enjoyed the work because, like I said, I had a more soft corner towards dispute resolution and, that side of things. So this, like, allowed me to, do cast proceedings as well, allowed me to kind of, have the disciplinary proceedings, and just I felt closer to the football field also because, all the disciplinary violations, etc. While I was on ground also, as a legal officer, I was like watching every yellow card that would go out in a match, and, because we had to go out and then serve caution notices and things like that. So I felt more connected to on-field activities along with all the legal things, that we were doing. So after that, but yeah, almost like after doing the Asian Cup and everything, I felt I've had enough experience of this, and probably now I want to go back to India and kind of, work there. So just before, like, things went under a lockdown, I just started my new job in India, and I've actually only met my new colleagues virtually so far because it's just been like that. So I joined the Indian Super League as the league secretary. And I'm also, like, again, handling the regulatory aspects of the league there, and, majorly, again, like disciplinary things and governance issues and regulatory, I'm majorly handling that. So that's what it has been so far.
Thanks, Amrita. Rustam, what do you?
Thanks, Roshan.
Different career trajectory, I guess,
yeah.
when compared to the others. You've gone from aviation finance to sports arbitration.
Yeah. Basically, But no, but first, just thanks for having me today. I think sharing a panel with you, Namrata, Srini, and Aahna is a privilege. I guess I would consider them all as well-established sports lawyers, and I'm not sure I can say the same thing about myself because I'm still to sort of properly start off full-time in the industry. But I'm happy to share my thoughts based on a few experiences so far. So I finished my law degree in the UK, and then after that, while I was there, I did a couple of related sports law internships. But like everyone else, it sort of emanated from just an interest in sports law. And eventually, I did come back to India where I qualified over here. I had to sit a set of exams conducted by the Bar Council of India, followed by the AIB, which everyone else has to do. And then I started working as an associate at AZB in Bombay. I worked mainly in the general corporate law department, like you pointed out, Roshan, a bit of aviation finance, which the only thing it has in common with sports is that it's a bit niche. But apart from that, I had minimal, I would say, exposure to sports-related work. I think similar to Namrata when she was at Amarchand, you'd have maybe one or two sports matters come in, but nothing sort of substantive, at least that I was involved with. And it had sort of been a career goal, dream, however you like to put it, to sort of practice in the sports law industry. So I decided after 3 years of practice at AZB that I was in a good position to actually give it a shot and try and break into a career in sports law. So that's when I decided to apply to ESD. The not the version that Aahna did, the full time 1 year masters, and I started that in Jan 2018. So for those who are not familiar with it, the course is structured into two bits. There's an academic component for the first 6 months, followed by an internship, which is the second part of the course. So the first 6 months was spent in Madrid, where and it was a good experience in terms of similar to what Namrata said about the network that you develop both with the people that come to teach you and those that are your colleagues. And yes, of course, you learn a lot about the subject matter of sports law as well. And following that, I did my internship at the offices of a CAS arbitrator called Massimo Coccia, based in Rome, which was for me an absolutely fantastic experience because it was an area. CAS generally is an area that I continue to be quite fascinated by. And sports arbitration. So this really confirmed to me that sports disputes and regulatory issues was an area that I wanted to try and focus on. So my next move after I guess it wasn't easy, but I managed to secure myself a paralegal position at Mills and Reeve on their sports disputes and regulatory team in Manchester. Where I worked for 6 months for the latter part of 2019. So that was from July till January this year, July 2019 to January 2020. And I was then offered a full-time position on their team, so the same sports disputes and regulatory team. So I then had to come back to India to get my work permit, and then COVID happened. So I'm stuck here, but hopefully should be going back in the next I think month or so. So I think that's my journey in a nutshell. But obviously, having listened to the journeys of everyone else, I would say that there's obviously no right or wrong or even preferred path into sports law. It's obviously important to understand what it is that you want and then take the steps that you think would work for you as an individual.
So I'll now take all of you back to a journey through time where all of you are students again. You're in law school, you're at a point where you say, you know what, I love sport and I'm training to be a lawyer. So the two have to combine and give me a career somewhere, right? But what did you do to strengthen that belief and to convince yourself that you could do or rather have this dream career in sports law. Srini, let me start with you. Was there a moment in law school where you said, I could make a career out of this? Or did that thought come a little later?
Like I said earlier, when we were in law school, I think it probably never occurred to me that, you can be a sports lawyer and make a career out of it. And it probably hit me that, this could be full-time and I could probably go do only sports law probably when I was in Star at some point of time. And that was also quickly succeeded by a thought that maybe I should be in the business of sports, like I said earlier. So if I have to pin a point of time, it was probably sometime when I was working at Star, when I thought, maybe this is something that we could pursue full time and do something out of it. Yeah.
What about you, Aahna? Was there a eureka moment that you had in law school?
Well, of sorts. I mean, so when I just joined law school, we have a intra-college sports festival, and while they have various sports that are part of it, there's no cricket for women that's a part of the competition, right? So I went to the college university representative and I said, I'd like to play on my class's men's team. Is that okay? And he just made a joke of it, and he was like, do you know that we play with a leather ball? And I said, do you know that I got chosen to play India under 19? And so he was, taken aback, and he was nice enough to sort of organize a cricket match for women as that year. I don't think it happened ever after. I think it was only that first year. But I think that sort of, pushed me. I said, why this perspective of women and sport not going along together? And that's when, sort of I started reading if there was something that I could do in sport while at law school. And that's when, of course, I think IPL was just about starting out, and Nandan was, of course, involved, just, so reading, getting to know information in terms of, okay, who's setting up the IPL, what's going on, what happens at the IMG end and stuff like that. And then the more I read, and then eventually, I think in my third year, when I went to LSE for my summer school, is when Dave Gangji was one of the professors there. So I spoke with Dave, and Dave again said Nandan's doing some work and so on and so forth. So that's when, of course, one thing led to another, and I learned more about the field. And I knew by the time I was graduating from law school, I was pretty certain that this is, what I really want to do. I don't want to. And of course, a lot of people questioned my decision at that point in time, including my own parents, who were like, it's such a niche area. It's so unheard of. And why do you want to do just this? And I think that's what sort of made me take the safe route of doing a mix of entertainment and sports law as my first master's, just in case one didn't, work out. At least the second was going to work out, given how big the entertainment industry in India is. But yeah, I guess that was it in the first year, and then obviously speaking to Dave later in third year.
But at law school, do you think there were sufficient opportunities for you to explore this interest in terms of internships, maybe even project writing, for instance?
At ILS, no. I mean, Pune was, of course, nobody had even heard of sports law largely. But of course, there were opportunities. Because like I said in the beginning, that because the college hours at that point in time were so restricted, you had the whole day free to yourself. So obviously enough and more time for you to be able to explore and indulge in some self-studying, some self-research, or writing. There was ample time to write.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that of course were things that you could take up to pursue an interest of your own. I think that's what sort of in a law college, at least back in the day, I think the hours have changed now, and it's a lot more in classroom hours at ILS. But I think that's what sort of made us slightly different from the national law schools, where everybody had the same pattern, 9 to 5, and post which everybody pursued their own interests. We had the full day, so everybody was doing something or the other that was different. And some people, of course, chose not to do anything at all. They were like, okay, they'll figure it out, because a lot of people, I think 5 years down the line, realized that they didn't even want to pursue law as a career, right? Yeah. So I guess, so that's what gave us ample time to be able to, pursue our own interests. So I used to, of course, watch a lot of sport, but also, read a lot about it.
Thank you, Aahna. Now, Amrita, next to you, did you at any point think that maybe this is what you could do for the rest of your life? And how did you go about making certain almost tough decisions?
For me, actually, like I mentioned, it was after I interned with LawNK that I realized, yeah, it could be a full-fledged career. Seeing all of you there already. So that was like the point I really thought that, okay, in the future, I can also kind of, look to this as a full-time career, becoming a sports lawyer, working at a sports law firm or like, some sports law related organization, anything like that. Because before that, while in law school, it's not that you hear too many people talk about it or do that. I guess probably from our law school, I was the first one who did the FIFA Master, and then it was Shini, and then we have a few others who've kind of, done some other sports law masters, etc. But before that, there weren't really enough people who were talking about. We didn't even have like, any extra credit subjects or something like that on sports law. But we had like a thesis, kind of a seminar thing. So in that, I still chose to do like sports law and, kind of went ahead with something on that. And while in law school, the senior students, they started like, this mentorship thing. So they opened up different subjects. So I was actually teaching sports law. I myself didn't know so much then, but whatever, like I interned a bit, got some experience, read up a bit, and with that but still it was, the time that I was myself learning, and then I found a few other junior students who were interested in that. So we used to kind of, get together, talk to each other about different sports, the regulations around sports, and, kind of try to write some articles together and things like that. So all of that kind of just helped keeping the, interest in sports law continuing. And after that, like I said, but right after law school, I didn't go into sports law, start working straight away. I mean, I took the more safe option of having a law firm job and, the financial security and the name of a big law firm, etc. And even while I was changing, again, if you talk about getting the support to, again, move out from there into the sports law, that was again a bit tough. Like, I will have to give it to Roshan because you always helped me out. Like, even when I was asking for options that, is this a good sports law option? Should I go for it? You would always be like, yeah, like read up about it and talk to some students and find out and at least be encouraging. But most of even the partners in my law firm, who I was in fact going to ask for like recommendation letters, etc., to apply for like, all of these sports law, LLMs or like, FIFA Master, they were all like, we wouldn't encourage you to do something like this. It's not even an LLM like this FIFA Master. They were like, it's not even proper LLM. Like, what are you even doing? What future will that give you? Everybody was quite, discouraging me to kind of take it up. But like my parents were very supportive. And, I just felt like I said, maybe the financial security of a scholarship helped me to kind of go for it. But that's how I did it. But there weren't enough, mentors or others at that time or, others who had done these masters to really reach out.
Thanks, Amrut. Rustam, to you next. You also chose to pursue an undergraduate degree at the University of Warwick. So what prompted that decision? And by doing that, did you naturally step into a market that was more aware of sports law and the opportunities in the field?
So to answer your first question, I think my aim was to sort of try and pursue the standard UK law degree followed by training contract route. Unfortunately, due to a number of reasons, and that was actually quite a few years ago, that didn't work out, and I did come back to India, and I think that in the long run that worked out, given how everything panned out. But to answer your second question about whether the market was generally more equipped, I would say yes and no. If you compare it with what it is today, it's not the same. I did always have this like I said, I used to compete. I used to be on the judo team at university, so I have done judo pretty much all my life. So I was, in that sense, I wouldn't call myself a sports person, but yeah, I did do sport. I was pretty active, and I had an interest in pursuing sports law. There was a firm called Couchman's. It doesn't exist anymore because it's now merged into a bigger firm called Charles Russell.
Charles Russell, yeah.
Yeah. They had sort of, they were running informal internship sort of program. They would take students for a couple of weeks, so not very long either. But I think that was one of the first. So I applied for that and got into one of those, and that was the first sort of my first brush with sports law. That was also just before the London Olympics. It was the year 2011. So there was a lot of work happening around that, commercially, sponsorship and that kind of thing. So I guess yeah, people did obviously have a recognition about what sports law was, but not in the way that it is today, where you have it's actually a much more crowded market, and there are a lot more boutique firms that have come up as well.
And staying with you, Rustam, you've also managed, in some sense, the holy grail for Indian lawyers, which is cracking a sports law job in the UK. Do you want to take us through the process and what your learnings from this have been?
Yeah, sure. I genuinely, it's down to a lot of things. To begin with, I think it was something that I had at the back of my mind when I set off for my masters. I will be honest that I did want to try and stay in Europe. Like Aahna mentioned, she wanted to come back to India. I didn't for a while. I wanted to try and stay in Europe for the simple reason that given how developed the area of sports disputes and casts and things like that are in Europe, I knew that if that I would probably have given some time, I probably would have been able to do that here in India, but maybe not at the same scale in Europe. So I can't say that there's a fixed formula. It was down to a lot of, I would say, luck as well, but there were sort of three elements that I sort of considered important generally in my job search, which ended up in securing one at Mills and Reeve, and I refer to those as the three P's. And for those who joined the Law and Sport webinar, I think about a month ago on a similar topic. Forgive me for the repetition, but I think it's important. And these three are patience, in the sense that you're not going to get a job overnight. It takes months. In my case, it took me years. So that's one. Perseverance, in the sense that it's very easy to give up, but obviously don't give up. Keep learning, keep applying, keep writing, putting yourself out there, keep trying to improve. And preparedness would be the last P. In terms of, yes, like I said, I agree, I did benefit from luck in the timing of my application and when I reached out to them. But I also believe that you do create your own luck, and you must be prepared to be lucky. And I think the entire the recruitment process at Mills and Reeve has been a good example of the application of these principles in practice. So if I may just to sort of elaborate on that, so I was about to start at Eastday in 2018, and I first had a conversation with someone on the Mills and Reeve team before I started my masters in January 2018, just as an introduction, said that this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, and we just had a chat on the phone. And 5 months later, when we were sort of looking to get into our internships at Eastday during our masters, I sort of made it known to them that I wanted to be working at Mills and Reeve, and can you try and put me forward for an internship there? At which point Mills and Reeve got back and said that no, they weren't accepting applications. About, I would say, 4 or 5 months later, I followed up with them myself by sending across just a CV and a cover letter. And again, they said that they weren't looking, but if anything changed, they would let me know. And then this was again 6 months after that, I applied again. I was sort of looking for jobs. I was in Europe. I applied to them just a simple email saying, just wondering whether anything has changed since we last spoke. Here's my CV again. And they actually said that, yeah, why don't you actually come in and let's have a chat? And that's how it all started snowballing from them. So then they offered me a 6-month paralegal position to start with, followed by my latest offer now as a full-time associate. So I think the lesson that I take from there is that obviously you need to keep knocking on that door. You need to be perseverant without being too pushy, but at the same time you need to be prepared. Because I made sure that I gave it my absolute best when they actually did call me in for that interview, even though it was on short notice. So I think it's a good application of those 3 principles in practice, at least from my perspective.
That's wonderful, Rustam. Thank you. Srini, coming to you, do you think a master's degree is absolutely essential for a job in sports law, especially in India?
So, I mean, if you ask me if it's absolutely essential, I don't think it's absolutely essential for a job in sports law in India right now. But having said that, the master's degree definitely gives us a broader perspective. Like I said, I think what we go through in law school, or generally what we learn through our, education system here, and what you learn abroad, through the academics and the industry experts that come in there, I think that brings about a definite change in attitude as to how you look at even certain small problems. It may not be how you strategically approach an issue, but even how you approach an agreement, for instance. And that sort of perspective definitely helps. But if I have to go back to answer the original question as to if it is essential to work in sports law in India, I don't think so, because end of the day, we are a very evolving field, and like we have said, it's niche and it's growing as well. It's not with its own sets of rules or customs, etc., which you need to know a lot about to get into. So I think with a little bit of work experience and undergraduate degree, it's very much possible to work in sports in India, and it's not a master's degree is not an essential as such.
And I guess even funding a master's degree comes with its own sets of challenges.
Yeah.
I remember the time when I was younger and I took the FIFA master's brochure to a bank for a loan, and they said, "What is this degree?" We can't even be sure that you'll come back and get a job. So that put paid to that.
Yeah.
Namrata and Aahna, my next question is for you. I'm like a lot of fields, especially in India right now, we could do with more women sports lawyers. And to this end, both of you have been involved in Women in Sports Law, which is an initiative that started in Switzerland. Could you talk us through what it is and what you aim and what it brings to the table, especially for aspiring female sports lawyers from India? We will start with Aahna.
I thought I was going to say let Namrata take the lead, since she's the representative of women in sports law in India. Let her take the lead on this one.
Go ahead, Namrata.
Sure, thanks, Aahna. WizLaw actually started, I think, around 4 years ago only. It's like a network of women lawyers, this association formed in Switzerland, but it actually has, members from like around 50 countries in the world, and women lawyers or law students interested in sports law, all like women from really across the world who are members. And the idea is more like to kind of help each other out. Because not just sports law, overall, if you just see that, the whole sport industry, women obviously are not so much in numbers as the men are. So the idea of this, network was to kind of help the women kind of, get more opportunities at first. And because there were a lot of so Despina Mavrovati, she is one of the co-founders, and she was a CAS, the managing counsel of CAS at the time. So she was one of the co-founders, and she even came to teach us at the FIFA Masters. That's how I kind of, got to know her. And when they founded this WizLaw, she contacted me, said that you should join this. And then, I applied to become a member. There's a small membership fee, etc. But otherwise, it's quite inclusive. And it's like you could actually reach out. Like, just I'll talk about an example. Just a few days ago, I needed some, information about some Spanish, RFEF regulation, some Spanish football regulation, something. And I could immediately reach out to one of the WizLaw members, a Spanish lawyer, who immediately kind of helped me out and, got everything. So it's like you have this whole network of practicing or like, interested sports lawyers, women sports lawyers, who help you with, kind of reaching out, opening up. If there are job opportunities, they would kind of, look out for you. If you need anything, you could reach out to them. They help host a lot of events and panels. So that's why like Aahna and I, like last month, actually, just like beginning of this month, we kind of did a, this panel like talk, just the two of us on, again, careers of sports law for women in India. So again, like sports law, it's not like a closed thing only for women in that sense. We have a segment called Friends of WizLaw, where the men who want to support, women lawyers or help give them a platform, or even, when we have these bigger annual conferences, etc., we also have men panelists, etc. So having a more balanced kind of this thing. But yeah, that's how it's generally is, like, a lot of events, talks, even small scale, like just, when things were okay and you could have like actual in-person events, they would have a lot of like, any big conference, etc. happening. Along with that, WizLaw would kind of host a breakfast talk, or like, between the lunch break, they would just kind of hold a round table talk on any of the, sports law related issues, contemporary issues, and, just spreading the knowledge in that sense.
Aahna, if you want to add to that.
I mean, it's not different from any other network. It's just that for a change, you see, where if I go, let me give you an example of the CAS conference in Switzerland that takes place every alternate year. So when you walk in, that's attended by about 800 to 1,000 lawyers. So the ratio is probably 1:10, right? There were 100 women out there and 900 men. But it's good for a change, for the ratios to reverse, to have a body like this, and to see a lot of women sharing similar experiences. I mean, it's not that the experience, like initially when I started out in 2011, 2012, just like I said, I mean, a lot of people question what's a woman doing in sport in India. It's not that women abroad have not faced similar questions when they started out. So it's good to know that their journeys have been similar in a lot of ways. And, you're not an alien in that whole zone. Of course, they might have faced it many years earlier than we faced it. But it's also good to know how things are progressing and changing for the better. So, and because it's a smaller group of people, of course, the opportunity to interact is a lot more. So I think that sort of takes us a longer way.
We have about 30 questions from the audience. So I have one last question for all the panelists. In a minute or so, what are your tips for aspiring sports lawyers? I'll give you all 15 seconds to think about it. And we'll start with Srini.
Yeah, in terms of tips, I think the first one's to probably read and write a lot more, because we need a body of literature and we need more hands on board probably on that. And reading, of course, ensures that your interest develops and also clarifies any doubts that you have, which could be as basic as, do I want to continue in this area or not, as such. And secondly, don't shy away from asking questions. I think especially the lawyer section in sports, as far as I've seen so far, has been a very responsive bunch, and we're always there to answer and help people around. So any doubts in whatever field, whether you have to go to a master's or is this where you should intern, etc., feel free to reach out to the people that you know or you have access to, and I'm sure they're always on hand to help. So I think that's probably the two basic ones that come to mind immediately.
And then I guess in most sports law issues, it's also important to build an Indian perspective on things. That's also probably the only way to bring about reform in our system itself. Most recently, I think the AIFF put out the latest version of the RSTP after 9 years.
Yeah,
I think we needed some sort of push for India to come up to those international standards. Rustam, what about you?
I think my two bits would be, and this is probably the most basic piece of advice that many people have given or been on the receiving end of. But I think that would be focused on actually becoming a lawyer first, and understanding what it's like to be a lawyer, what it's like to work at a law firm, just gaining general transferable skills which can be transferred across into sports law. That would be one, and two, I would sort of agree with Srini on the writing and reading bit, because there's so many resources out there today for people to actually develop their knowledge, and use that and you can use those platforms to express themselves as well through writing. And writing is also very helpful, not only to acquire knowledge, but also developing your skills in terms of the research that you conduct, because it forces you to be thorough with your research if you're going to be putting your thoughts out there. So it gives you a good understanding of the topic, and finally, it gives you profile, which I would imagine is a good thing at almost any stage of your career. So, yeah, that would be my 2 bits.
Thanks, Rustam. Namrata, over to you.
So yeah, Srini and Rustam kind of spoke about what I wanted to, both the things about reading and writing, or about becoming a good lawyer first. But apart from that, I would also kind of put out this caution to everyone that a lot of the people, they want to get into sports law thinking about the glamorous side of things, thinking about that you're going to be involved in sports, you can approach the sports stars and things like that, and how it's all like glamorous. But that's not always the real situation. It's like becoming any other lawyer. You do face a lot of challenges while you're there for it. So if you just want to get into it for the glamour, it's not going to be that. I mean, you'll obviously get your chances, and you'll obviously feel good about doing working in law in sports and seeing those matches and things firsthand and everything. But there's a lot more to it also. So you need to have your patience. You need to have all your ideas, values, everything in place about what you really want out of it. And yeah, reading and writing, I mean, again, it comes back to being a lawyer. As a lawyer, you have to keep reading up everything that keeps evolving. But yeah, reading even the task, the judgments and stuff that come out and the things around it is always also good to know that what's happening at the moment in the whole sports law sphere. So you'll never really feel out of place, even if you've not done a master's or things like that, but you're up to date with all the relevant information. You as a good lawyer can interpret those regulations which are like more technical football or cricket or any sport related regulations, then it just gets easier for you.
I guess also just being aware of the commercial reality of sport. Sport is an industry that depends a lot more on the good times than I think most other industries do, as we've learned from COVID-19 so far, with leagues being cancelled and things like that. Aahna, I'll leave the last word with you.
I'll just sum up. I mean, there's not much to add in terms of what Srini, Rustam, and Namrata already said. But yeah, I mean, first things first, read, and read not just about sport in general, but read about issues in sport from a legal perspective. So, I mean, that's like usually when I'm interviewing associates, that's generally the first question I ask, or even when I look at the series. Yeah, I mean, and also for God's sake, I mean, this is something I don't even entertain those applications when I see an application that has just been a copy paste of another application. Often an application is addressed to our firm, but it has a name of another firm, or it's addressed to me, but has a name of another lawyer. So yeah, those are things that you must. And also I'm kind of old school in my approach in terms of, I don't think back in the day, like I still remember, I got an internship with Mr. Mokul Rohatgi. So, the person who had put me in touch with Mr. Rohatgi forwarded me his number and said, just pick up the phone and call him, So I said, I can't do that. He's a senior advocate. There is no question of me doing that. I'd like to write him an email and wait for, so I think a lot of people are starting to just randomly pick up the phone on you. I don't, and they just jump to the point saying, hey, this is what, or I had applied and I haven't got a revert, or this is what it is. Don't pick up the phone at all. We're all professionals out here doing our own thing, busy during working hours on most days. Don't do that. And Secondly, I mean, please always ask if someone's available to talk. Please seek a time rather than, whatever. So a bunch of those things, I mean, I think goes to, and I think I have been in touch with Rustam over the last 3 to 4 years in terms of following his journey. So hats off to the determination and perseverance that he's had. I mean, that's what matters most, I guess, in the end of it, because sometimes you're looking at his journey, I always tell myself that if I was in his place and I wanted to work abroad, I don't think I would have had the patience and the perseverance, the kind of patience and perseverance he's had to actually land up where he's landed. So I think that's also something that's extremely important and something you can learn from him.
Thank you so much for all your time. Go on, Anna.
No, I was just adding to what you said, right? The financial aspect. So a lot of people, and I think that those are some of the questions that came across, that in terms of doing a sports law master's. Yeah, it's not the most lucrative profession out there to start with. So be prepared. I mean, if you're taking a loan to go pursue that master's, if you're lucky enough that your parents can support it, or you worked several years and you've saved enough, I think that's when it makes more sense rather than just getting out of law school and shooting off thinking that you'll probably land up with a lucrative package like the Khetans or the Amarchans of the world. That's not how it is. So that's also another reality that you should keep by your side. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone. We have about 40 audience questions, but I think we'll take them only after the next session. So to the extent any of you can stay back, please do. But thank you for your time. We'll move on to the next panel now. Over to you, Amrut.
Thank you, Roshan. Welcome everybody to this series of panel discussions. I actually listened in to the earlier one. While it gave me a perspective of age, it was also fascinating to listen into the journey of all of those young lawyers into the world of sports law, and to see some, see the kind of work that they've been doing in the industry. So I have a challenge before me now. If the earlier panel was was brought to everybody by young lawyers for the benefit of young lawyers, this panel is going to be brought to you by young at heart lawyers for the benefit of everyone else. And we have a fascinating panel here once again. I think we don't need any introductions here because all of you who've signed in know clearly about all the panelists. But even so, a quick round of introductions. Ms. Vandana Gupte heads IMG Reliance's legal team. Mr. Anish Dayal, counsel at the Supreme Court of India. Vidushpat Singhania, founder of a boutique sports law firm called Krida Legal, and Ryan Locke, also a founder of a boutique sports law firm called Pace Legal, and I'm Amrut Joshi. I run a small law firm called GameChanger Law Advisors. Let's get cracking because I think we have a very compressed time. Roshan's set the rules very clearly, and their panel also stuck to the time. So let's make sure that we give them a run for their money. So I think one common feature that all of us on this panel also share is that none of us have had received any formal education in sports law, at least at the undergraduate level. Am I right in, I think saying that? I think only Vidushpat has done a master's in sports law from my reading of each of the bios of everyone. But I think everyone else come from a vintage when sports law was not, not a subject that was even heard of during our law school days. And I think it's been an acquired discipline for each one of us. And so therefore, it makes it even more interesting for us to understand how each one of us actually got into the world of sports law. How did you foray into the world of sports law? And how did you get started? And how has it evolved from the time that you started as well? So let's start with Vandana ma'am. Could you shed some light on that?
Sure, Amrut. Thanks so much for the introduction. And I've already got a warning on being brief. So I'll try to be brief no matter how long it takes. I thank SLPN for organizing this discussion of you. And I hope that there will be some takeaways for the young generation out there. So to be very honest, I never planned to become a lawyer or a sports lawyer. So my career path is quite offbeat. My legal career did not start with my graduation. So because at the time I graduated, I was already a mom and I had a 1-year-old baby with me. And for 11 long years after my graduation, I was a homemaker. So it was a huge break in my professional career, but I've never regretted it because even being a homemaker taught me things like multitasking and doing whatever comes my way. And I think that also impacted my professional working a lot. And like those were 2 plus points that I could say were my takeaways by being a homemaker. So after 11 years in 1996, I decided finally to cross over to the other side and become a career woman, start my professional practice. And I was keen on litigation. So I joined the chambers of a counsel practicing in the High Court. And now I went there with all full enthusiasm, thinking I'll be wearing my band and gown and arguing in front of courts and with packed audience and all that. But guess what? Like once I went there for the first 2 weeks, I was handed a big needle and green thread and asked to just stitch the, the briefs and the pleadings in a particular way. And for the next couple of months, I spent only in doing clerical duty at the departments, so to say, like filing for certified copies of the orders and filing summons for judgment and all those things. So I hardly felt like a lawyer, but on hindsight, I feel it was a real good grounding for me. And I think it is a must for all youngsters to know actually even the departmental procedures to be a good lawyer. Then after my training over there for a couple of years, I joined a corporate. I joined 2 NBFCs, one after the other, as a legal officer. And there there was a recession going on, not a recession actually, it was the impact on the market with the Harshad Mehta scam. So a lot of industries and factories had gone into BIFR and there was a lot of defaults. And we had around 500 cases of 138 cases like complaints all over Bombay and a lot of recovery cases in the Bombay High Court. So I was one of the legal officers who was handling this along with the external lawyers at that time. And after that, after doing my stints as a legal officer, I went back into practice. I started my independent practice until 2007. I was doing commercial law, representing a lot of multinationals in the High Court. And like it was a very intimidating task in the beginning, like going and arguing in front of courts. And at that time it was like packed courts and like also I had to face failures also. So it taught me actually to survive in that system, survive with failures also, because not each and every case would be in your favor. But still, even at that time, there was nothing to do with sports law. So in my time when I studied, there was nothing called sports law. And even when I was doing practice, I never even contemplated doing anything remotely close to sports. Because very honestly, like my only interaction with international sports was cricket, because I was one of those youngsters in the 80s which were really crazy about cricket and the World Cup and the cricket teams and all that. But apart from that, there was no interest or no interaction with in the sports area. But in 2007, when I was quite entrenched in the legal practice, there came a turning point in my career when I was offered a job as an internal heading the Indian operations of IMG. IMG was an international management group which was one of the leading global leaders in sports, entertainment, media. And I was wondering whether to go into this sudden change of area of practice and business. But I just thought it was a good opportunity to test out some new fronts. So I accepted the offer. And within 15 days, I was literally like out from the black and white world of the High Courts and the solemn corridors of the High Court, I can say, and plunged into the colorful, slightly chaotic world of fashion events and sports and stadiums and ramps. And it was like a total cultural shock for me. And honestly, like, I mean, I went over there and I thought I wouldn't be able to cope with it because, you know, you have a certain mindset when you have a litigation background and like suddenly going and interacting with models and players and all, it's a different ballgame altogether. But I pushed myself, I persevered, and my first, you can say, date with sports law was when I handled the ATP Chennai Open event for IMG. Because there we had the player contracts, we had venue contracts, and there were also, since we were organizing the tournament as organizers, there were other issues also like compliance of the events with local laws and regulations, policies. So that was very interesting for me, and I really got sort of a liking for that area. And later in September 2007 came IPL. I think IPL is a platform which many people have, you know, it was the first sort of professional league in India. And I think a lot in my generation, a lot of people actually got their first experiences in sports through IPL. And since IMG was appointed by BCCI to structure the entire IPL, we did the entire documentation. Actually, I worked with the IMG UK team to do the documentation right from the ITBs, that's the tender documents, to franchise documents. I attended franchise workshops, there were player contracts, player auctions, every aspect of IPL we were involved in. And that, working with the UK team on IPL gave me a tremendous insight into how a sports league, professional sports league is established and run in India. So, and after that in 2011, of course, we had a joint venture, IMG had a joint venture with Reliance, and our business diversified all the more. Our collaboration with the All India Football Federation came along, and it gave me the unique opportunity to be again involved, not only just involved, but also head the entire legal handling of the ISL. And especially a private company doing such a big league and such a high stake tournament, it gave me a tremendous exposure to a lot of sports issues, regulatory issues, and there was a lot to handle. Like it was not just commercial front, those commercial, corporate, IP. I mean, there was a huge fusion of all laws required to run a league. And I have, so that as I said, running the ISL, establishing the ISL was a huge exposure once again. And of course, by now I was fully into sports, and there was no looking back after that. And today we are doing not only sports, but also fashion, lifestyle, talent management, sports television production. So there is a huge area of business and law that we operate in. And so this is where I am right now in IMG Reliance and as a sports lawyer.
Thank you so much for that, rather succinct exposition of, how your career has evolved from the time you began, to where it is right now. And I think it's almost transcended the same time that Indian sport was transformed. I think, Anish, in terms of vintage, you're probably the next in line in terms of having seen Indian sport from the time of, the CAB broadcast judgment, if I'm not mistaken, in 1995, to, representing Rajasthan Royals and, doing a whole host of other interesting litigation in and around sports. So obviously you come at it from a different perspective. But again, it'll be fascinating to understand your foray into the world of sports law, because like everyone else, there's I don't think there was any formal education in this field, and so everything that has been learned has probably been acquired over a period of time, through your practice. So it'll be fascinating to understand how your practice has evolved from the time from back then to now.
Thank you, Amrut. So hi, everybody, and thanks to the SLP initiative. Thank you so much. And hi to the co-panelists. It's good to see all familiar faces together, although virtually. So, okay, so quick one. With hindsight, I would hope, like Vidushpat, that I would have had the opportunity to read sports law when I was doing my degree at Cambridge. But that time was, that was 1993. So way time back where it was not ever subject at all in contention. So anyway, I finished my graduation in law, which was a regular graduation from Cambridge. And I then worked for some time and decided to come back to India to set up practice. And in 1995, when I joined the chambers of Dr. Singhvi, he was an upcoming senior lawyer that time. And we had the opportunity to represent Prasar Bharati that time against one of the biggest litigations that time, arbitrations which happened between Star, Pilcom, maybe the audience here is probably younger, and that was one of the big media litigations which happened. So the essence, that was actually a great deep dive into broadcasting rights. So what was happening is post-liberalization in 91, the live sports rights became a huge hot property for the new media, which was the satellite media. And therefore, a lot of money was flowing into that. Therefore, litigation was coming into that, conflict was coming into that, and therefore lawyers were required. I mean, that's usually the chain. And so I was very fortunate that as a young lawyer, I got an opportunity to participate in that while I was in his chamber. And post setting up my independent practice in 1998, being a young lawyer, being able to understand media, it was a new thing. People did not understand what broadcasting was about. People couldn't understand what was uplinking and downlinking, what was commercial rights, sponsorships, footage, clean feeds, dirty feeds. I mean, these were all new things as much as issues in IT are new right now. So that time it was pretty new. So I got it on the upward curve. And then from there on started a journey, which was really a subset of my regular commercial corporate practice. And I must stress that I never intended to be a sports lawyer. In the regular commercial corporate litigation plus consultative practice, a lot of the media and entertainment work I kept in, which had a sports context. And that's how it really started. And then there were these huge number of commercial rights which have been signed up by consortiums for telecasters at that time. So right from 98 to 2000 and 2002, we were doing Wimbledon, ATP rights. I was getting into new agreements. So it was very fascinating. It was truly fascinating. I could very well relive that journey again. And then sort of it always remained a fairly focus of my practice. And somehow when you do a couple of cases, you get to be known as a sports and media lawyer. And that's how sort of it incremented. And then 10 Sports happened. 10 Sports was one of the big disputes which led to the simulcast thing and the Prasar Bharati Mandatory Sharing Rights Act later. So I was the lawyer for 10 Sports, and we oversaw all that very fascinating new litigation about rights of entertainment, whether it's a fundamental right or not. And then post that, the next really big curve was the IPL. And I remember having a conversation near the Bombay airport by Rajasthan Royals personnel saying, like, would you like to, we'd like to retain you as the counsel for Rajasthan Royals. And 11 years since, I think I was the most fortunate of the lawyers because I oversaw all the controversial litigation for Rajasthan Royals, which was a great learning process for a new IPL venture, which had new issues. And yes, there was a lot of star value associated with being there at the IPL matches and being at the after parties, till it, of course, tapered down a lot later. But I think we'll come to that later. But that's not the core of the lawyer's practice. That's pretty collateral, and it's pretty subsidiary. It's a lot of hard work. And then, so IPL was the big thing. I think then post IPL, in terms of evolution, what happened was we started having these baby leagues, as I would call them, for a lot of sports. You know, people came up for cycling, volleyball, badminton, all kinds of, everybody wanted to have a league. And therefore the private agencies and marketing agents which wanted to manage these with the federations were the ones looking for legal advice. And therefore the league structuring happened. With the league structuring, player contracts happened, sponsor contracts happened, and the whole gamut. That whole deal happened. And I think that still carries on to some extent, but most of the baby leagues have really disappeared somewhere along the way. And the next big curve in, I think, my career was the anti-doping phase. I was fortunate enough to be involved in the relay girls case, the Commonwealth relay girls case. And that was a big learning of how athletes function in this country under the anti-doping regime, and how sometimes it seems very skewed, where people who may be inadvertently involved in a situation don't really have defense and don't have legal representation. So it was a fairly emotional journey from there, where I started helping athletes pro bono largely. A lot of the athletes over a period of time, where I thought it's important to give them representational services. So, which I still continue to do. And so that was the other sports connected phase which happened. And thereupon, I think the next phase of evolution has been now that sports has matured so much, which has fantastic personalities on your screen with us, and the whole ecosystem is expanding. I think there's a lot of discussion on policy, on governance, on ethics. So I think it's the next wave where we prune and trim what we have created over a period of time. And which is why I think these initiatives are fantastic, because we have so many minds together now. It was a fairly lonely journey back in the 90s. So now it's great to pick up the phone and talk to anybody here on the screen, or email them and say, like, hey, listen, what do you think about this? And I think the fraternity, the sports lawyers fraternity is very, very, is lovely. There's a lot of bonhomie around. And I think that's something for the going ahead in the future for young aspirants. I think it's important to cultivate that as a theme for the future.
Thanks, Anish. It's really fascinating insights, and totally share your perspective on the sports lawyer community being so cordial, very well knit, tightly knit. And I think it's a lesson for young lawyers that you don't really need to look at fellow lawyers as competitors. You can actually collaborate very effectively with lawyers, and create something that is useful for a larger community as such. Speaking of which, I think we'll move next to Vidush. Vidush, again, I think it'll be useful to understand your journey, and also maybe talk us through some of your interesting experiences. I did notice that you worked with Justice Mukul Mudgal extensively. Apart from that, currently what you're doing with the IAAF, if you could give us some insights into what really does that work entail as well, and the regular work at your law firm, Krida Legal. So just any insights on each of these three areas would be great.
Thank you, Amrut, actually, for moderating it. And as I said, fellow panelists, seniors of mine in the profession who I've had a chance to interact with and really I'm fond of. So good to see everybody virtually. I can see Anish is still in his hill house, enjoying the weather while we are in Delhi in the heat and COVID. But such is the life. I had fortunately, when I started out, and I actually started out my journey in sports law is very different. I actually was looking for a course for my mother, or actually an issue for my mother on art law. And that's the time I came, this is about third year in my college or something. Again, there was no sports law in India. There was no much deliberation or publicity on it. So I was just looking, I saw something on sports law. It sounded interesting. I played table tennis, I played cricket competitively, I sailed and played golf competitively. So I was always interested in sports. I said, this looks very interesting. Let me explore this. Then I kept reading, and I said, I think this is something that I want to explore further. So I did a course in South Africa at the University of Pretoria. Then I got a secure internship at the Law Center at Den Haag. That kind of gave me a good flavor of what sports law was about as such. And then I was quite certain that I want to do or be in sports law. But when I passed out, and even when my interviews and everything I did, I said I want to do sports law. Most of the law firms came back and told me, listen, there is nothing like sports law. There is no work. Somebody came and told me, and all these are jokes, but these are things that come back your way. That you're talking that there's a doctor, but you're talking that if somebody has a injury in the wrist and that has a carpal tunnel and that gets injured, then I am a specialist for that. So that is the kind. So therefore, how much work will you get? Will you be able to survive or not? So those are the questions that came in. I said, fair enough. I wanted to pursue it, but as no opportunities were coming that soon, I applied and I got through Mr. Dushyant Dave Chambers, senior advocate of good reputation. And what I learned from him is to work very hard. He was a taskmaster. I think anybody who knows him knows that he's a taskmaster, but he was an excellent human being. So he taught me a lot, taught me how to work, how to be diligent and read in detail the files, which you don't really read or you learn from your law college. You don't learn so much. You learn how to go through and how to be ready for questions that a judge could ask. So I learned a lot from him. And while I was finishing or I was in his chambers, then an opportunity came up to write a book with Justice Mudgal. This is way back in 2008 or 9, I think, somewhere around that time. To co-author a book with him. He wanted to write on sports law. Somebody I knew said he's very interested. He's done a work in sports law. So I got into work with him. Again, when I was writing the book with him, I was working as a legal clerk in the High Court. So besides working on the book, I was actually helping him researching on the opinions, the judgments that he was giving. So again, it was not limited to sports. I was just working as a clerk with a judge in the High Court. So again, I got to learn how judges are thinking and how they perceive arguments of lawyers and how they are writing their judgments. So that was also a very good learning curve when I worked with him. Post that, I got an opportunity at the Commonwealth Games, the legal team at the Commonwealth Games. And that was a steep learning curve. I got to work with the English solicitor, Stuart Corbishley. He was one of the heads of the legal team. And I think when you're working with a major event organizer, you learn all the ambits of the sports law. You learn about sponsorship, you learn about endorsements, you learn about broadcasting, you learn about TV rights, you learn about you're doing major events within a particular event as well. So you have your opening ceremony, closing ceremony, and those kind of things. So you learn the entire gamut and you learn to negotiate. Being Commonwealth Games, there were enough controversies around it. And controversy is always good for lawyers. It may not be good for the rest of the people, but it's always good for lawyers because in that you learn far more, you read more, you try to take out your points more, so you learn far more. That helped. In that, I got linked to CAS, the World Court of Arbitration for Sports, because they had an ad hoc panel. So I learned about their proceedings and how they work. Subsequently, anti-doping work, I got through with Lakshmi Kumar and Sridharan. They all wanted to start a sports law department. So started working with them, started developing a sports law practice. Got an internship, not an internship, a secondment with Squire Sanders. So there I learned a lot about anti-doping and how anti-doping at the international stage is done, how to make a representation, what are the key issues that you need to pick up. I worked with a lot of football clubs there. So I learned a lot about football club licensing, on football club issues, player issues, coach issues, negotiations. Some of the negotiations I did with the names which you only dream about and you see on the TV, but I was negotiating and drafting the responses at that point of time. So that was a huge learning curve for me. Worked extremely grateful to Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran as well. Again, taught me how to focus and how to see where are the areas. He said, you can't go everywhere. Because initially when you start, you say, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this in sports law. He said, you can't run everywhere. Try to figure out what you want to do and then start focusing on that itself. So again, good learning from him. And then I think got an IPL just working with Justice Mudgal. I was a secretary to the IPL probe committee, and that just opened up another Pandora's box. And the learning curve, I think the amount of stress that I was put under doing that investigation was immense. I've never been under that kind of stress before or after, but the learning that I had from that was immense. Interacting with all the legends, interacting with the leagues, interacting with BCCI, interacting with the club owners, interacting with the lawyers, while every word had to be measured and everything was being looked at, and everybody was willing to rip you apart. So that was again a very, very good learning curve. Again, a lot of things came to, work with the police team. So again, got into the criminal aspect of what match fixing is, spot fixing is, how police investigates, how they perceive things, body language, how to see body language. So those are things that I learned from there. And as and when that was tapering down, I thought maybe why not put my hand as an independent law practice as well. So started Krida Legal. The journey has been good. As I said, we started as a sports and gaming law firm. At the start, it was just me starting it off. But now, fortunately, I have two more partners. The firm is no more a sports and gaming law firm. It's yes, it has one of the key areas as sports and gaming, but we have a good IP team headed by Subhash. We have a good litigation team headed by Ashish. In fact, I've had the chance to work with Anish as well on a couple of matters. So that's how it went about, and now then ended up doing a lot of football work because of my journey learning from football and drafting regulations and working on helping, at least giving information on the regulations and the ISL and disputes on the club licensing, on player contracts, on clubs where we have been also against each other, Amrut, a couple of times.
Yes.
But yeah, so I think that's been the larger journey, and as I said, it keeps evolving. Anish said governance is a new key. I was involved in drafting the sports code, the sports bill for the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports. Unfortunately, the new sports bill has never seen the light of the day. Even the new sports code, which I think Nandan was also a part of, has never seen the light of the day. It's again under litigation. But that's again bringing about a new journey in the sports sector, and which is moving away from the traditional sports, which was always an amateur activity, to a sports which is now considered as a commercial activity. And as soon as you come on to sports considered as a commercial activity, all your issues pertaining to good governance, be it age, tenure is one part of it, conflict of interest, hygiene issues, how you tackling tender issues, they all come into the picture because it just becomes a regular commercial aspect. And that's, I think, where a good journey is coming in, because of working with these and working with a number of disputes. I'm sure all of the lawyers here will confirm, most sport federations are less worried about how to exploit and go ahead commercially and how become profitable, but most issues on sport federations are election and selection issues. More, I don't know, I would put it at about 80 to 90, 85% of the disputes in sports are in courts are election and selection. Only 15% may be commercial or other aspects. So, you get into that, end up representing quite a few of the bodies, ended up conducting a few elections through our offices with various returning officers. So got a good look into how elections are conducted. And I applied for the World Athletics post when it came out, went through about 4 or 5 rounds of interviews. And I can say proudly that I'm the only Asian there on the governance of World Athletics in that sense. So, and there what we do is we are doing, which is something which is not happening in India. You will be doing candidacy rules, vetting of candidates before they even are allowed to come onto the electoral college, moderating their communication, as well as working on even facilitating the governance aspects of World Athletics as well, because these questions, because governance committee, the vetting committee and the election committee are very tightly interlinked, they work together. So issues on governance also, we keep giving recommendations in which then go on to the world governance thing. And there are various issues that keep coming up. So that's been my journey as such.
Thanks again. That's so useful to know, because there's so many facets to building a sports law practice. And like I always say, it's different strokes for different folks. And I think on that note, I'd like to introduce the last panelist, Ryan. Hey, Ryan.
Hi, Amrut.
Hi. So Ryan and I share an interesting history. Ryan and I were colleagues at MMB Legal. So while I know of Ryan since those days, I'd obviously want him to share his journey in the world of sports law and also talk us through some of the exciting work that he's been doing with the Football Players Association of India in particular. But if there's any other interesting experiences over the last 12, 13 years that Ryan can share, will be useful to know, Ryan.
Sure. Thanks, Amrut. And I'd like to thank Sports Law and Policy Network as well for organizing this. And good to see everyone again virtually. So that's a good thing. Now, getting down to where I started off. So like how everyone in this panel has said that when we were studying law, there was no such thing as sports law. At least we did not know about sports law in India. So when I graduated, I was keen on sports. I used to be, I would play sport throughout school, throughout college. And I was always very keen on putting my passion to my work. So what better way to get that together than to practice law and sports if possible. So when I graduated, unfortunately, I did not start off as a sports lawyer like most people here, because at that point of time, there were not too many opportunities. There were no leagues around that time. So it was very rare to get a sports law job as such. So I took what I got and I started working in an IT company in the in-house team called Saskin Technologies Limited here in Bangalore. I was there for a year and a half and I kept looking out for opportunities till I did find one at MMB Legal, where Amrut was a partner there at that point of time as well. And I applied to MMB Legal and fortunately I got in, and that's where my sports law practice kind of started to kick off. Let me be, as most of the other lawyers have already mentioned it, and even the previous panel, I guess, that you cannot only start off with only sports law. So MMB Legal is a corporate law firm. They do other work as well. So while you do get your bits of sports law now and then, but you have to also chip in with the other work that's there in the firm to become done. So you do learn that way. After I was at MMB Legal for 10.5 years, done a lot of work there, from your IPL to all the other leagues that have come up later on, ISL. As Anish was saying, a lot of baby leagues had come up as well in between. Some of them have died on as well. So there was work around there with your player contracts, whether it's bid documents that you're looking at for clients who want to, try and bid for a team in one of these leagues, or just general contracts, player contracts. It could be sponsorship contracts. You could be representing a team as well. So that's where we started working a lot with Bengaluru FC at one point of time over there at MMB Legal. Did a lot of their work from their working with their player contracts, sponsorship, could be their stadium agreements, that whatever that came by basically. So we were supporting them for a few years over there. And that's where my interest also got more into the football side of things, because as a sports person as well, my interest lies with football as such. So I started building my practice in football. I started concentrating more in football, like how Vidush had mentioned earlier on. You can't seem, if you're a sports lawyer, try and go in all directions. You should try and be focused to some extent, is what I feel, so that you can become, I won't say an expert, but you can become a subject matter. You have knowledge on that particular point or that particular sport, because each sport is unique. So for example, football has its own regulations. You have your CAS decisions, you have your FIFA DRC decisions that also come up, which are important to read. I think the previous panel, they were mentioning that as well, that you need to, keep reading and be up to date. So you do end up consuming a lot of time if you want to know a particular sport well and to do well in that particular sport. Having said that, there are also normal contracts that come up, like your commercial contracts, whether it's endorsement agreements, where it's more contractual in nature and less in terms of sport, I would say. So go through that process till it's when we also started, then last year I decided that I should move out of MMB Legal, been there a long time. So I decided and I set up Pace Legal last year. It's been just over a year right now. And as Amrut was mentioning, I do support the Association of India. So I help them in all their legal requirements here in India. So currently two interesting projects that we've been working on is taking us some time though. One is the NDRC, that's the National Dispute Resolution Chamber regulation. So we've been drafting the regulations along with the other stakeholders, which is the AFF, and also from the club, they have their own representatives who are looking at the regulations. And another project is the standard player contract for football players, because unfortunately what's happened in India is that each club comes up with their own contract, though there are certain guidelines in place, but usually it's in the lower leagues that the clubs make the player sign anything they want. So FIFA has directed that there should be a standard player contract. So we've been working on that as well, and hopefully these two things should come out soon. So that's basically my journey, Amrut. I'm just trying to keep it brief because I see that we have only 20 minutes left. So
yes,
I think we'll
thanks so much for keeping an eye on the time. In fact, since the focus of this panel, or rather how to differentiate it from the earlier panel, is also in terms of explaining to our listeners, how do you develop a sports law practice, right? I mean, we've all heard about everyone's, both in this panel and in the earlier panel, their journey into the world of sports law. But it's one thing to to experience sports law, but it's another thing to say, can we sustain a practice that is centered around sport or sports law? I think in the remainder time that we have, I have a few questions that I think can help answer this in a more holistic manner. Vandana ma'am, if you could possibly tell us, I mean, how much percentage of your daily work is comprised of sport or sports law related matters, and how much would it be of other matters as well? Because you work for a sports entertainment and fashion consulting organization in that sense. But I mean, a lot of times we get asked this question, like, are you a sports lawyer alone, or do you do other areas of law and sports is only one area of your practice? So it'll be interesting to understand from an in-house perspective how much of your time is occupied purely by sport-related matters.
Yeah, I mean, this to answer your question, I think see, being an in-house counsel, as I've said, that there are a lot of verticals, business verticals, and it's not just hardcore sports that we do. There is a lot of sports-related activity when there is a tournament coming up, and like when just prior to the commencement of ISL, for example, or the commencement of any other sports activity like grassroots development and all, we do have a lot of sports-related contracts. But since we are also, it would be, any sports property has to sustain itself. It has a lot of commercial aspect also to, we have a lot of commercial contracts to do also. So it's not just hardcore sports. Also for ISL, like, we have a good regulatory team with us. So when it comes to regulations, we of course look at the legal compliances, but the basic regulations are drawn up by our regulatory team. And so I would say about maybe in a year, it would be about 30 to 40% would be on sports.
Okay, that's useful to know.
Yeah.
Anish and Vidushpat, sorry, I'm moving this around so that we can get everyone's input. So from a litigation practice standpoint, right, how much of your litigation practice would probably be sports centered, and how much would be non-sports centered?
So anyway, I have presumably the permission of Vidushpat to take that first. So, so litigation in sports is very sparse. Point number one. Point number two is, as Vidushpat mentioned, most of the litigation relating to sports in the courts is relating to the election issues in federations, which is really not really sports law. I mean, it's just a slugfest between various factions of federations. So that doesn't make you a true blue sports lawyer. There's some litigation which crops up on commercial issues on sports. But usually it's between player and federation and stuff like that, or otherwise. So I would say, well, I'm just about completing 25 years in practice. So I would say about maybe not more than 10 to 15% of litigation. 15% of litigation, because the regular work is really largely commercial corporate work. As a counsel, that's mostly what we do. Sure.
Vidush and Ryan, since both of you also run niche law practices, and your practice encompasses litigation, but is also focused around serving. I did notice on Krida Legal's website you do a fair amount of work in the field of art law. right? So I mean, so that's the objective of this question is to actually help our listeners understand that being a sports lawyer in India is not being just a sports lawyer, but it's about having more than one string to your bow as well. So,
Vidush, go ahead.
No, Ryan, please go ahead because I took earlier much time.
No,
so
no worries, no worries.
All right. So yeah, I think Amrut and I think you correctly said, litigation in sports also I would bifurcate it into two aspects. One is litigation which is sports specific, which is like anti-doping, your disciplinary bodies in sports, which could be within the federations, your dispute resolution or player status committee, disciplinary committees in various bodies, arbitration within IOA. So that is one aspect. And the second is general litigation in courts. So I would say consuming or including both of them, I would say about my work in that not more than 5 to 10% maximum. That's about it. But largely what your practice is around is corporate law, doing transactions. So if somebody wants to buy a company or a IPL franchise or is engaged in commercial transaction, a lot of times because these are big corporate houses, when they get comfortable with you, even if they start doing sports work, they might still give you some other work as well. Why don't you handle these transactions as well for us or these contracts? So you end up doing a lot of that as well. You end up becoming holistically a lawyer for a corporate house rather than just doing sports related documentation. Having said that, I would say as a firm, our sports work will not be more than 20% of the entire billing. The rest 80% comes from other aspects.
Okay. Right?
Yeah, so I agree with Vidush there. So when you look at litigation, you also look at dispute resolution, which could be, as he said, appeals committees or player status committees, other things. So there's some work that goes on over there as well. So coming to the percentage part, I would say again about 70% is non-sports work, other forms of corporate law work and other forms of work, and around 30% sports work, which includes your dispute resolution that comes up, regulatory work. It could be your contractual work, your player contracts, things like that.
Sure. So, I mean, there, I think it was very, very useful to, get these perspectives. And I think it leads me to the next question. And just by the way, I share the sentiment that has been expressed by all my co-panelists as well. As a law firm, even we've realized that try as much as you want to build a niche sports law practice, it is not, in the present circumstances, at least over the last 17 years that I've been in practice for, I've not seen a time when, I've probably spent more than 10 to 15% of my time in a year on sports related matters. So clearly it varies, but what the sense I get is that even in a very good year, and even for an in-house counsel like Vandana ma'am, it only stretches up to 30 or 30% of one's work day, which then leads me to the next question, and ma'am, this is a slightly different one for you because it's more relevant for the practitioners here, which is it financially feasible to build a specialist sports law practice, given that only 20% of the time is being spent on sports related matters? So therefore, are we really looking at broadening the scope of the services to be provided to clients to include sports, entertainment, gaming as related industries? And would that then be the way forward for specialist sports practices, whether in-house, whether from a dispute resolution standpoint, or even whether from a corporate commercial standpoint as well, where you're trying to obtain work and do work in and around, the industries of sports, entertainment, and gaming, because gaming as an industry has only started to, come to the fore in the last 5 to 6 years. And my own personal take on it is that's probably where we are headed to in the 20s. But I'd love to hear from each one of you. A quick view from each one of you. I mean, anyone. We can start with Vandana ma'am and go around again.
As I said earlier, like in a private, as an in-house counsel, we have to cater to whatever business the company is doing.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
A hardcore just sports, I don't think it can really sustain, because even in the sports area, a lot of our work, percentage of work is involved in commercial contracts related to the sports also. So if you see what is like just the sports, like on-field issues or off-field issues, I mean, those are again, I think a minor 10 to 15% of it takes a time. Yeah, only 10 to 15%. But majority of our time is spent more in commercial contracts, getting vendors on field, looking at operational issues, disciplinary issues. So I don't think that it would be sustainable to just have a limited practice for sports law in-house also.
So when you build an in-house team within IMG, you obviously look for lawyers with more skills than just somebody who says that, you know, I've studied sports law. You're really looking at a well-rounded lawyer who probably has an understanding of contracts, corporate law, employment, and a whole range of other issues. This is just for the benefit of one.
Absolutely. So they have to be, as it's a cliche term, but you have to be a good lawyer to come into sports, because ultimately you can't sustain yourself only on sports. It has to be it's a wider range of law that you need to be well versed in.
Same question, but applied to different verticals. That's the litigation dispute resolution vertical. Vidush and Anish, I mean, your views on that in terms of how we envision sports practice going forward.
Is Anish there, or is he dropped out? I can't see him. Sorry.
Yeah, it looks like he seems to have dropped off.
Okay, I'll take it then by the time Anish joins in then.
Yeah, carry on.
Well, so yes, as I said, no, you can't go or simply build your practice only on sports law. For me, thank God for gaming, because in these COVID times, I think those guys have been doing a lot of work. So thank God for that. But as I said, you have to develop yourself, and gaming also, it's like sports. You have to keep yourself updated with the international regulations, with the Indian regulations, with each judgment, with each aspect, because even gaming also has about 10 or 20 different aspects: poker, rummy, fantasy, quiz games, and then various other small, games of skill, Ludo, many things are there. So you have to keep yourself abreast of there, because each of them is unique in its own self, like sports, and each sport being unique in its own self. So you have to keep yourself abreast of that. But as I said, you have to sustain yourself. You have to build your practice larger than that. Personally, for me, I end up doing largely sports and gaming as my focus areas, with corporate transactions and fashion transactions built into that, and that occupies me 100%. But that's about it.
Anish?
Yeah, I'm so sorry, I got disconnected. So
the question being, how do you envision a sports practice?
Yes. So I was going to say a few points. One is that the sports law and sports pie is very small.
Right.
So that's important to understand that. And therefore the pie does get distributed naturally. So therefore, and it is not particularly lucrative. Only the commercial side of it may be slightly lucrative for a legal practice, but certainly a large part of disputes like federation disputes and all that are not particularly lucrative. So therefore, it leads us to a point that can you really have a completely sports law practice? One point is that I think you need to have a slightly generalist view when you have a sports law practice as well, because you have to be updated on commercial issues, corporate issues, in order to advise well on sports issues. So you just can't really dissociate. Thirdly is, I think as we go along in the future, I think the collateral aspects of sports are increasing, as Vidushpat mentioned. There's gaming, there's media, there's entertainment, there's convergence, there's ethics, corporate governance issues. So I think for a younger aspiring lawyer, it'll be very interesting to say you have some stickiness to what you do. And the more you do in all these connected areas of sports, you will get more work. You will start getting more work, but you can't be 100% focused on just sports. You can't just depend on sports. But I would think that it has a potential to expand a bit more than it used to be.
Yeah. Right? To wrap it off?
Yeah, I agree with what the other three panelists had mentioned before me. You can't just only concentrate on sports law. At least at this point of time in India, there's not that much work. Like Anish said, that the pie is really small right now. So it would you need to be a good lawyer first, as mentioned by Vandana ma'am as well. That you need to be a good lawyer first. So it's good to be a generalist to some extent, because even with any sports, like how Vidush had mentioned, that even though you have a client who's into sports, their business they start giving you other business as well at times, which is general corporate as well. So that's where it is that you need to also be a general lawyer as well, generalist.
Sure. I think that sort of brings me to the last question before we open it up. We have 5 minutes. So each one of you, could you share what you believe may be defining trends for sports law or the practice of sports law in the 2020s? Anyone can take this first, and then we don't need to go in any particular order.
So I would say, considering the experience of COVID, we are getting to virtual life and reasonably successfully. The world is going on reasonably well. So I think we are looking at a lot of online transactions. We are looking at more online stuff, and I think that's the way to look ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Anish, because sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I said I agree with Anish, because this is now a digital era now for us, for sports also, especially in this indefinite pandemic situation. So we are always trying to do some damage control or mitigation of whatever has been. It's a hit to the sports industry globally.
Sure.
So that's the easiest way out.
It's a hit to the sports industry, but it can also be offset by the gains to the esports and the gaming industries. And I think the other aspect, Anish, since you come from a vintage of having seen broadcast rights being controlled by the state, now to the extent where we're probably seeing, we're coming to the end of the cycle where broadcast rights have, in terms of valuations, have maximized. And I think the next frontier is moving into sports properties onto OTT platforms and to digital platforms as well. And so therefore, possibly the valuation battle and the rights acquisition battle will shift to the digital domain. Do you see that becoming a big space? If you look at even Facebook's most recent bid for IPL, for the IPL streaming rights as well, is that an indicator of things to come?
In fact, that's a very interesting point. So from a one-way transmission of a broadcast, the world's now moving to a two-way traffic of fan engagement. And that, I think, is going to boom. Absolutely. I mean, in all kinds of fan engagement, where technology allows you to take the inputs of your users, consumers, and build up on that basis. Advertising is going to be built up on that basis. Therefore, the money is going to come in and digital platforms are going to come in. So I think sports delivery is not going to be a one-way delivery anymore. Yeah, in the traditional way. Yeah.
And I think just to wrap up, consequently, you're also looking at an era where sports technology or, different kinds of sports tech innovations will come to the fore in the decade ahead. And possibly that's where the action will shift to where. It's useful, to get this well-rounded perspective from different lawyers as well, because I guess it's also useful for younger lawyers to know how the industry has, evolved from pretty much the 1980s to now, and where we are possibly looking at it going in the 2020s. It's an exciting time, certainly, and for younger lawyers than us, because I still believe we are all young lawyers. I think the sky is the limit if they are able to, possibly approach this with a broader perspective than they may have had of what constitutes sports law. I think it also goes back to the fundamental debate, which I've read in a number of sports law treatises, on is there something such as sports law, or is it sport and law? And I think that question mark still remains. There are. I think there is no. In my mind, there is no right answer. There is something as something that we can call as being pure sports law. But equally, as practitioners, you also need to know the intersection of sport with other bodies of law. I'll wrap it up at this particular point, and I think Roshan has also nudged me to, throw open the floor for audience questions. So, Roshan, would you want to moderate that, or would you want me to take this ahead?
I think you have a few questions in the Q&A section.
Go ahead, Roshan. You want to go ahead? Okay, I'm just looking
to
at
promote the previous panelists as well.
Yeah, please.
The first is on the scope of sports law when it comes to organizations at the local level, academies, for instance, tournaments, leagues. And the question is, what are the kinds of services that sports lawyers can actually afford them? Because I think this is something we brought up in the previous panel. It's seen as a very glamorous field, which looks purely at the very top of sport. But I'm sure sports lawyers have a role to play even at the local level, for instance, whether it's local clubs, local events. What can sports lawyers do for the community, for the local events and leagues around them?
I'll just quickly summarize. So at the community level also, I think the principles remain the same. They want to organize and they want to hold events, and that principle does not change. Only the scale just goes down. What also gets added on at the ground level is scouting, talent development, as well as contracting with them, as well as issues pertaining to safety and health concerns and risks also get highlighted. So those are the issues where sports lawyers, as I would assume, typically work when we work at the grassroots.
Thank you, Vidush. There's one from Ayush Manjunath, and this is more to do with esports and doping, in the sense that esports has been to witness phenomenal growth during these 2 months. But parallelly, is there also an increase that one may see in doping issues? Anish, maybe you could take that.
Yeah, I presume the question relates to doping regarding esports. Personally, I haven't really dealt with something like that, but certainly in various sports discussions internationally, this issue is coming up about doping in esports. I don't think the mechanism is pretty much robust right now to deal with something like that, because I think we are all still grappling with esports in the first place. So doping pretty much follows later. Effectively, it would mean that somebody needs to take some drug to keep themselves so active that they can perform better over the computer. I mean, that's what it is. So I would say that would be very difficult to try, because you've got to start testing, you've got to start the whole process. And I frankly don't think, I don't know if anybody on this panel has wrapped their head around it.
So, we work with the Esport Federation, and they're also tackling, because they don't have any ties with the anti-doping agency in India, as well as the fact that what are the drugs. Now, normally in the international scope, that is drugs like adrenaline and everything, which basically helps in increasing your concentration. Even glucocorticoids are also taken in sports because they help in your fingers working much faster. But at this point of time, nothing is clear whether e-sport is a recognized sport or not, because at one point of time, while it was a exhibition event at the Olympic Council of Asia, the IOC went ahead and said we would want to do esports, when suddenly they backtracked because they said sports cannot be owned, and most of the times the gaming studios own the rights to the games, and any sport, as we know traditionally, just has the rules and regulation and anybody can play it. So can sports be owned and controlled by a particular agency? That's the whole debate that's happening at the esport level. So that's a bigger question, whether esport is actually a traditional sport or not.
I think there are a few questions for the panel, for the first panel as well. What skills can you acquire at the college level to build on any interest that you may have in sports law? Namrata, you want to take that?
Sure, I was just asking if I could take that. So I would actually say that while you're at law school, internships help. Kind of, get to know, experience that sports law and how things really work in sports law. And reading, writing. These days, there are a lot of people who are even blogging. So, people are blogging on sports law. So I think while you're still at college and, you're interested in the future to go and work in sports law, take up some internships, read, write, start blogging on sports law issues and just again be connected with that whole sports law world while you're still in college, and then you can take it from there once you graduate.
Thank you, Namrata. There's another question on any online courses that someone with interest in the fields can take. Any guidance in that from anyone on the panel?
I can take that, Roshan, if you like.
Sure.
So I think to start off, I'd say that now everything is anyway moved online. So any courses that exist by default would be online for the next couple of months anyway. Having said that, I think that there are a handful. I personally haven't done any online courses, but I do know that EaseDay offers an online course which is similar to the one Aahna did, if I'm not wrong. There's an institution called Rex Sport, REX Sport, and they have sort of run an online course for the past few years. I'm not sure what the situation again is with that, but that would be another option. And then there's the DMU postgraduate certificate or LLM in the UK at De Montfort University, which I think is also one of the 3 places where Namrata can confirm, and Srini as well, where you do the FIFA Masters. So they run I think a year-long certificate in sports law, which is also online, and which is what you're doing as well, right, Roshan? So yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Sorry, that just struck me. And yeah, apart from that, I can't really think of anything else in terms of full-fledged courses.
Great, thanks, Rustam. And there actually is a question for you as regards the ISD LLM. Was it focused on football?
It wasn't focused on football, but it very much was dominated by football, and that just tends to be the case. That just happens because it is the most popular sport, and there is by default the most money in it. But there were elements of things like sports arbitration, which was a focus, although it was football centric. We did a couple of lectures on other sports such as basketball and the BAT, which is the Basketball Arbitration Tribunal, and Formula One, because that's structured completely different to how other sports are. But I would say that it is very football dominated, not focused, but yes, it's dominated by football content.
Okay. Thanks, Rustam. We have a very macro level question here. As the new economic scenario post COVID-19, how do you see that changing the future of sports law? I think it's open season. Anyone from the panel can go for this.
I think we sort of discussed that towards the end of our panel. And because sporting activity, as we know it, has pretty much ground to a halt, except for the current series that's going on between England, West Indies, a few leagues in Europe which are currently in action. I think EPL and the La Liga have been completed now. It obviously does raise the question as to how will the sports industry react to this pandemic, and because the pandemic is a force majeure which one can't control, the action has to shift online, and I think that is so. Esports is definitely going to be the biggest beneficiary from from the current pandemic. Traditional sport will have to reinvent themselves, and it's going to be interesting to see how they respond, because biosecurity bubbles are possible in limited contexts, but as we are seeing, even in those limited contexts, even the slightest amount of negligence can actually have huge ramifications. And so if you're going to organize large tournaments, then the risks are just magnified that much more. And also, I think to organize those tournaments, you first need to have an environment where the pandemic has sort of been brought under control as well. So until that happens, pretty much all sporting events are in a limbo.
Thanks, Amrut. Anyone else who would want to pitch in?
Yeah, Roshan, I think I can just add over here. So because of the pandemic as well as it's in most industries, sports has taken a hit, and there have been many disputes in the sports industry as well for non-payment of salaries as well because of the pandemic as well. So that is keeping some of the lawyers busy. But I agree with what Amrut says. We'll have to see how traditional sport, how they invent the wheel in terms of keeping it safe for both the players. We see currently the EPL and the other some of the other European leagues, how they are conducting tests before the matches, after the matches, ensuring no one is inside the stadium, things like that. But sports, again, I don't know how long it can sustain that way because the fans make up a major portion of the sport or the particular match that is played. So let's see how that goes.
Roshan, just wanted to add on that. Let's just understand the basis of the business of sport. Now, business works on commercials advertising, where somebody would like to advertise on a platform where a lot of people are available as an audience. So that used to be traditionally broadcasting, and now it's going to be online. So what is happening now and what is expected to happen now, the advertiser is going to really shift and create and push the platforms to create situations where loads of people actually hook on. Now, since everybody is sitting at home for a large period of time, that is actually going to be a potential opportunity. For example, I was reading this really strange thing about virtual cycling. I mean, the cyclists are actually cycling from home, the world's best cyclists, and are in a competition where they're sweating it out, and their parameters, their body parameters, and all are being all monitored. And that's amazing. I mean, as a traditionalist, I won't enjoy it, but I'm sure some 20-year-old would have great fun watching the best cyclists sitting from the comfort of their home. So the whole paradigm is shifting, and in a macro way, though, generally legal services are affected in any case. I mean, as all lawyers here would say that the payments are lesser and all that. So sports is really a subset of that, but it just might take off in a different direction.
On a lighter note, taking from what Anish has said, there was this whole race that was held on F1, and it was being held, e-race was being held, and a gamer defeated one of the Formula One racers, and he simply left, I can't do this anymore.
For any other audience questions, please write to us at slpc@lawnk.com, and we'll try and answer as many as we can. Thank you all the panelists. Thank you for your time, especially on a Saturday afternoon. Although Ryan, Srini, and Amrut, there's nothing better we could have done during a lockdown. Thank you so much, and we'll all be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you once again. Bye.
Thank you.